In this video today we're going to talk about phylogenetic taxonomy. This is the study of evolutionary relatedness among various groups of organisms. So we're looking at classification of organisms, but we're also including some of the evolutionary aspects of it and how organisms are related to one another. When making these phylogenetic taxonomy, we can have a tree, we could have a cladogram. And what we're looking at in these is they take into consideration the morphology, how organisms change throughout their lifetime, so like a tadpole to a frog or a caterpillar to a butterfly. They also are going to look at a lot of the things that we talked about in the evolution unit with the evidences, so the chromosomal characteristics, nucleotide amino acid sequences, the embryo development, and then of course fossil records. So this first little tree that you see here on your notes is a phylogenetic tree, and this is going to show relationships that are thought to exist among groups of organisms. So it kind of looks like a family tree, and the closer an organism is to another one on the tree, the more related it is, the more characteristics they have in common. The farther away from each other they are on the tree, the less related they are, or the more differences they have in their genetic makeup. What we're really going to focus on today is the cladograms. So cladograms are going to be very similar to those phylogenetic trees. The only thing that we're going to include here is we're going to have the characteristics. So we're going to look at certain traits and which organisms have those traits. So in this specific tree here that's in your notes, we have up top listed the organisms. So those are the 5 organisms that we're looking at. On the other side of the tree, we have the actual traits. So the first trait that's listed is a spinal nerve cord. It is right here on our tree, and it's to start. So that means that every organism above that trait, or where the trait is listed, has that trait. Okay, so all 5 organisms have a spinal nerve cord. If we look at the second trait, it says jaws. That means that only the organisms listed above that trait have jaws. The organism listed below it, which is the lamprey, does not have jaws. And it goes the same for all the others. So amniote egg, lizards, mice, and cats have an amniote egg. Perch and lamprey do not. And then the same thing with the 3 ear bones, hair, and mammary glands. Mice and cats have those traits, while none of these organisms do down here. So in this cladogram, we not only can see the traits and how maybe adaptations have happened over time with the evolution, we can also see how closely related organisms are to each other, and we can see the derived characteristics of those. So we know that in this case, a cat and a mouse are most closely related because they have the same traits in common. Whereas the lamprey and the cat are least alike or least closely related because the lamprey only has one of the traits while the cat has all the others. So that's how a cladogram looks. What we're going to do to start is we are going to work on the cladogram worksheet, and I'm going to go through this with you. And in this we have a chart that shows us the characteristics. Using that chart, we are going to create a cladogram. Okay, so for the sake of time, we are going to skip this Venn diagram on step 2. And we're going to focus mainly on the data table and making the cladogram for step 3. Okay, so let's look at the data table first. Yours is probably blank. If it is, I need you to go ahead and fill in the X's. So the X's are telling us which traits those organisms have. So for example, the kangaroo is going to have the dorsal nerve cord, the paired appendages, paired legs, amnion, and mammary glands. He has all 5 of those characteristics. And then so on and so forth for the other 6 organisms. Once we get those listed in, we're now going to use that to create our cladogram. So when we make our cladogram, we're always going to start with the simplest organism to the left. So I'm just going to start by making mine with a line, just kind of a horizontal line, or I guess a slanted line going up. We're going to always start on the bottom with our most simplest organism. So in this case, I want to look at which organism has the fewest characteristics, or fewest of these traits. So if I look, I know that the lamprey only has 1. So I'm going to go and start by listing the organisms up top. So I know the lamprey is going to be first because it only has 1 of the traits. Okay? And that trait is a dorsal nerve cord. So I can now put the trait below because I know this lamprey has a dorsal nerve cord. So if you remember what we talked about earlier, if it has a dorsal nerve cord, it's going to be in front of that trait on the line. In this case, the lamprey is. Okay. My next organism is going to be the one that has two of the traits. So in this case, it's the tuna. So I'm going to list the tuna on my line. Now, we already have listed that it has a dorsal nerve cord by putting this trait here. So now I can just add the next trait that it has. So if I look at my chart, the other trait that has an X is the paired appendages. So I'm going to go ahead and list that right here. So now it tells me the tuna has paired appendages and it has a dorsal nerve cord. And I'm going to continue with the rest. So I have the third one is going to be a bullfrog. The trait that it adds is the paired legs. The next one that has 4 traits is going to be the turtle, the snapping turtle. The trait that we're adding for the snapping turtle is the amnione. The next one is going to be the kangaroo. The trait that it has is going to be the mammary glands. The next one is going to be the monkey. The unique trait that it has is going to be the placenta. And then lastly I have the human. And the trait that goes with it is the canine teeth short, the forearm magnum forward. We're just going to list the canine teeth short. So that's how we are going to create our cladogram. So notice we're going from the simplest organism to the most complex. This is the simplest because it only has one of the traits that we have listed. This is the most complex because it includes all of these traits. So what this is showing us is the basic adaptation and evolution over time, if you will. So we know we can tell that the lamprey and the human are least closely related because they are the farthest apart. They have the least amount of characteristics in common. The rhesus monkey and the human are going to be the most closely related because they have the most characteristics in common. They have all of these in common with each other. Okay. Now, anything that's listed behind an organism, if we're talking within the same family or genus, we're going to be talking about their ancestors. So we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next worksheet. So that is going to be our basic cladogram. What you're going to do next is you are going to take the Cladogram Dinosaurs to Birds worksheet, and you're going to create a cladogram using this information in the chart. Now be very careful when you're reading this chart because it is a little bit different than the one that we just did as far as how things are listed. So what I would do is I would total up the number of shared traits for each trait. So how many organisms have each trait, put that in this column here. And then I would also go off to the side for each organism and count up how many total traits they show. That's going to help you organize your cladogram down below. If it has a plus in the box, it means it has that trait. If it has a little dash, it means it does not have that trait. So notice the theropods, it has none of the traits listed. So it's going to be the most simple of the organisms. So when you do this cladogram, because of that, the organisms are going to be listed above. So I'm going to put the animals' names above, and I'm going to put the traits below. And it says that here in the directions. Okay, so you're going to build your cladogram from simplest to most complex. Remember, the organism here is going to have all of these traits. Okay, the organism here has none of the traits because it's behind them. Once you've made your cladogram, you're then going to turn it over and you're going to answer the questions. Couple of things on the questions. If it says ancestor, remember that's anything that has come before it. Alright, so your ancestors or any people in your family that came before you. So use that when you're reading these as well. Some of these questions will have more than one answer, so make sure you list everything that applies. If you have any questions, please email me and I'll be happy to help you out with that.